kind of data that you are going to transmit, either it can be text or voice or it can be videos. So in spite of all these transmissions, the kind of data that we handle is in the fixed format called cells. Okay, so which is 53 byte in length, out of which 4 bytes refers to header and 48 byte is the payload, which is user data. So that is the ATM reference model. The data is handled in terms of fixed size content, which is called as ATM cells. And the fundamental principle of ATM reference model is virtual circuit switching. So it means that we are going to establish the connection towards the destination before we start transmitting the data. So where we are going to establish through the subnet. So the sender machine is going to establish the link to the sender machine using virtual circuit switching. So the fundamental idea behind circuit switching itself is sender should make a connection through the subnet to the receiver, then start transmitting the data, and after the data transmissions, we have to disconnect it. So that's a three-way handshaking kind of thing which we have discussed at transport layer when we are using the TCP protocol. So in the same way here also, but the term virtual says that so it's a circuit switching, but it is virtual because in the subnet the routers, okay, the routers handle your data. As a sender, you feel that these routers are dedicated for you, but the reality is quite different, that apart from your data, the routers also involved in handling others data. However, you feel that they are dedicated for you. So that's why it's a virtual circuit switching. It's not a real circuit switching like our telephone connection. Instead, it is a virtual. Instead, it is virtual. However, since it is a circuit switching, the data that it flows will take the same path. You can see in this slide that all your packets or ATM cells takes the same path through the subnet. So obviously, you can expect order of data at the receiver. So some ATM cells may be dropped in the subnet due to various reasons. However, the order is guaranteed. And it is quite reliable than connectionless service, which is datagram services. So now let's come to the advantages of this model. So the model is preferred because we are not going to handle a large data at a time, even in the subnet. Okay, so at most we have the content of 53 bytes. So routers will, they don't have much load. So they no need to have much buffer space at the input, because the content that comes at a stretch is a particular cell. So that's one advantage, and no router will be engaged for a longer time because it has to process one ATM cell, which takes a very less time because the size of the cell itself is at most 53 bytes. So that's the advantage, that the router will not be engaged with a particular user's data for a long time. So it can also serve others' data. So congestion chances also very less in the communication subnet. And each flow is identified using virtual connection identifier, VCI numbers. So every flow will be defined using VCI numbers. For instance, you take this a particular router, it is handling the data of the sender. Simultaneously, it can also handle others' data. But how it is going to differentiate these flows which are going through a same router is through VCI numbers, virtual connection identifier numbers. So building hardware is easy because you are going to have a fixed size of data. The size of the data that you are going to play with. So there is no ambiguity that what is the incoming data that you are going to handle. So unlike in other reference models, so here it is very fixed, and there is a possibility that you can also copy the incoming cell to multiple output lines. It's a kind of multicasting. So QoS is guaranteed quality of service we can provide in these networks, and the speed, the fundamental ATM speed is 155.22 Mbps. This is the architecture of ATM reference model. It's a little different than the previous two reference models that we have discussed, where it is only a layered structure. But here, apart from layers, you can also see certain planes, right? So it's a kind of three-dimensional structure, you can see. So coming to layers, you have three layers: physical layer, ATM layer, and ATM adoption layer, where the physical layer is further divided into two sublayers called transmission convergence sublayer and physical medium dependent. Similarly, ATM adoption layer is divided into convergence sublayer and segmentation and reassemble sublayers. So apart from these layers, you can also see certain planes, right? So user plane and control planes, and some management functions here, layer management and plane managements. So the user plane handles the user's data, right? So flow control, error control, all that will be handled by user plane, whereas control plane is looking after the connection establishment and connection termination. In between, if you have any connection breaks, the failures, then it will be troubleshooted, and all those stuff will be taken care by the control plane. So now coming to the physical medium, where you have transmission convergence and physical medium dependent sublayers. So this bottommost, which is a PMD, is the one which actually deals with your physical medium. So it can be, if it is a wide medium, it is going to define how you are going to connect to the wire, and if it is a wireless medium, how you are going to deliver your bits, binary ones and zeros, into air. So what is the definition? That is, we know that the physical layer is responsible to represent your binary ones and zeros with certain voltage levels and bit durations, and mechanical considerations, right? So same thing is applicable here. Okay, so physical layer PMD will takes care of all that stuff, and the transmission convergence is a sublayer which provides the compatibility, that is the ATM cells, right? So in the upper layer, the data is in the form of ATM cells, which is 53 byte in length, and that will be made as a bit stream, continuous bit stream at the sender side, and at the other side, the continuous bit stream will be rearranged into ATM cells, which is 53 byte in length. So that's the job of the transmission convergence sublayer. And coming to ATM layer, the data is defined in terms of ATM cells, the cell layout and the header format, all that will be taken care by this ATM layer, because the ATM adoption layer gives the content, which is large in size. So that we have to define at the ATM layer. So apart from that, you also take care of call establishments, that is virtual circuits.
So I had a doubt.
Yes.
So in the first slide, you had showed that 5 bits are reserved for the header.
Header,
That
5
so
bytes.
so in the previous two models that we have studied, ISO SI and TCP/IP. So after every layer, the header file is being added, right? The
Yes.
additional details. So here, for every, like after every layer, 5 bits are being added. The details, or how is it actually?
No, no. See, here there is no every layer. It is not going to, add the things. It is only the ATM layer is going to add the header, which is 5 byte in length. That is fixed. You are
So
talking
it
about encapsulation and decapsulation procedures, right? In TCP,
yes.
sorry, ISO model, every layer is going to do something and it adds its header, right? So whereas here, only the ATM layer is going to do that.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
So means the rest all layers are performing the same function, but we only have an additional layer in this reference model.
Not exactly additional layer. In fact, it makes the thing simple. It's a minimum layers here. You can see only 3 layers you can find here.
Okay, sir.
So apart from your virtual circuiting, also looking at congestion control, ATM layer also look into congestion control aspects. And the adaption layer handles the data when the higher layers provides the content which is larger than cell size, then it is going to make, divide, segment it. So SAR sublayer will segment it into smaller sizes, and at the other side, it will do the reverse procedure. So user plane, as I told you, it deals with the data transport, flow control, and error control, all that stuff. Control plane deals with the connection management, that is call connection establishment, connection, data transfer, and connection termination. So if there is any connection failure in between the data transfer, then it will troubleshoot, try to, fix that connection failure. And the layer and plane management, it provides the resources, it manages the resources and coordinate different layers in the model. So yes, the rest of the layers are covered. PMD is covered, right, which is the bottommost sublayer that is actually talks with your medium, physical medium. And transmission convergence, as I told you, it provides adaptability between ATM cells and your bit stream in the physical layer, right? So in the ATM layer, you have ATM cells, whereas in a physical layer, you have bit stream only. So that conversion will be taken care by transmission convergence sublayer. And ATM layer is responsible for call establishments, manage the, and cells, right? So it deals the data in terms of 53 byte cells, and it defines the cell format, cell layout, and the header formats. So SAR, as I told you, it's a sublayer, the lower sublayer of ATM adaption layer. So which cuts the larger packets into smaller cells. Convergent sublayer, it provides the compatibility between ATM layers and the higher layers, which is application layer. So if you want to compare your ATM reference model with the actual reference model, which is ISO-OSI, you can compare something like this. So for example, if you see here the physical layer of ATM reference model, right? So this is a physical layer of ATM reference model. So I can equate it. I can equate this physical layer, the lower sublayer, physical medium dependent. The functions which we have defined at the sublayer is as same as the functions that we had defined in the physical layer of ISO-OSI model. Same way, the functions that we define at the transmission convergence sublayer, so the functions are listed here. So it is as same as DLL of ISO-OSI model, right? So layer 2, which is a data link layer. And similarly, the functions which we have defined at ATM layer can be equated to the sum of the functions of DLL and the sum of the functions of network layer. Coming to ATM adaption layer, the functions of convergence sublayer and SAR, segmentation, assemble and reassemble, the functions can be equated to, some of the functions can be, we can equate it to network layer functions of ISO model and transport layer functions. So it's a comparison, because as I told you, ISO-OSI is the best reference model to learn and compare. So that's the actual reference model. But the other models which we are talking about, TCP/IP and ATM reference models, they are very close to the practical implementations. However, in order to deal with the theoretical concepts, ISO-OSI model is the actual reference model that we supposed to consider. Any doubts about ATM reference model?
Sir,
Yeah.
won't be comparing the application layer of the OSI layer?
Come again?
Won't we compare the application layer? Like we compared transport layer,
Yeah.
just like we compare transport layer
That
and the
will be
physical layers.
retained.
Won't we
See,
compare?
Yeah, we are not comparing because that will be retained. You can see here these upper layers. So upper layers, the application layer comes here. So that is as same as the one which we have discussed earlier. The main differences comes in the lower 3 layers only. You can see here. So convergent sublayer, which is the sublayer of ATM adoption layer, it provides the compatibility between your applications. You can see FTP, file transfer application, video on demand. These are different applications which runs at application layer. It provides compatibility between ATM reference model layers and the application level, the application layer stuff, that is applications. Any other doubts? Please mute your microphones if you are not raising doubts. It's really disturbing us. Okay, that's about ATM reference model. Then we'll just have a look at spectrum assignments and regulatory bodies. There are few regulatory bodies across the globe, so both also national wise, country wise. So we'll look into it and what exactly they do. So the frequency spectrum, that is the electromagnetic spectrum that you have, right? So it's a natural resource, in fact. So there should be some sort of understanding in making use of it. So there should be understanding between different countries across the globe. So these are the different aspects of the regulatory bodies, the allocation of the frequency spectrum, and issuing licenses, setting standards, and policing the airways. So this is the job of regulatory bodies. These are a few regulatory bodies country-wise. In US, you can see FCC and NTIA. Similarly, in India, you have TROI. So which will look after in allocating the frequency spectrum and issuing the licenses and setting standards, because these are very important even for the manufacturers. Okay, so to work at different frequencies. This is just an example I'm taking. The Indian government. Okay, so the regulatory body will actually allocate the frequencies for the service providers. So you can see something like at 700 megaband, 1 megahertz of bandwidth is of minimum cost is this much. Okay, so it may go up, depends on the auction, the participants, the auctions. Similarly, for 5G at 3.3 to 3.6 giga, this is a FR1 frequencies, which is below less than 6 giga. So 1 mega was of this much. So you can see here the cost came down because the bandwidth availability is much higher at higher frequencies. Okay. So this may not be a fixed figure because this is a minimum thing. Okay, so I have taken from news articles that this is a minimum figure. So it may go beyond this. So you can see the rough amount that is involved, 5.77 lakh crore. So which is involved for a stipulated period. And these are the 4G and 5G frequency spectrum. that are, we are using it currently for LTE networks, 4G networks, and some countries already they are using 5G wireless networks, where the frequency bands are broadly classified into FR1 and FR2, where it is less than 6 gigahertz frequencies. We call it as frequency bands. Okay, so that is FR1, and above 6 giga till 100 giga and beyond 100 giga. Actually, roughly it's a 100 giga. Okay, so we consider, but as per the standard, what it says is uh, what do you call 24.25 giga till 52.25 giga. That is your 5G frequencies. Okay, so for 5G wireless networks, so which is in the range of FR2, and the actual frequencies from 24.25 giga to 52.5 giga. So that band is divided. Okay, so it is divided into different smaller bands. For example, when I say it's a 28 giga band, so it means that it is somewhere around 27 giga to 29 giga, something like that. So when I say a particular band, 26 band, it means that it's a center frequency. So you can move around that frequency. So that frequency bands are defined something like this: N66, N71, and these bands N258, N260, N261, all these are FR2 bands. So these are actually we use for 5G wireless networks, and in FR1 we use N71, N66, N2, N41, N5, N12, N25, N48, right? So these are all FR1 frequencies. Okay, so here the catch is that, so for 4G wireless networks, which is LTE networks, so there are frequencies less than 6 giga, and even for 5G we have both frequencies. Okay, so there are implementations where less than 6 giga, as I showed you in India, 3.3 to 3.6 giga. And the same way in the FR2 also we have, if you take US, they are using 26 gigas, 5G frequencies. And there are, you can also see that MIMO concepts are introduced in LTE, where you have multiple transmitting and multiple receiving antennas in order to achieve higher data rates with high reliability. Okay, so we can achieve antenna diversity as well as multiplexing diversity with MIMO concepts. Fine, that is all about it. So there are regulatory bodies. So here, who have allocated these things, right? So who told that you have to use only these frequencies in this so and so country? So this is the actual job of regulatory bodies. Okay, so why they use? See, you can see in South Korea they use only certain frequency bands. So if you see, North America, they use different frequency bands. Who exactly decides all this? So it is a job of the regulatory bodies. And similarly, you can see here. So here you can clearly see this is actually FR1 frequency bands. Okay. So you can see in India 3.3 to 3.6 giga. This is frequency bands in FR1 for 5G. Same way here 24 to 30 giga. These are the majority of the bands that are used for implementing 5G networks. So yes, so you can see here. So this is actually 26 giga, band, where it spreads from 24.5 to 27.5 giga. And there are, research. The predominant research is happening in this range of frequencies, but implementations is yet to. Okay. So the major research is happening till 100 gigahertz in the millimeter wave frequencies, and beyond 100 giga, we call it as terahertz frequency bands. So truly speaking, the terahertz frequency starts with 300 giga, but actually we consider in the research articles, they consider that beyond 100 giga itself, we consider it as 0.1 terahertz frequencies. Okay, so when you talk about terahertz communication, it starts from 0.1 terahertz frequencies. Okay, can someone tell what is terahertz?
So 10 to the power 12 for tera.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. 10 power 12 is terahertz. Fine. So you can see here that when you go for higher and higher frequencies, the length of the wave is very, very less, right? Because end of the day, it is lambda equal to c by f. So when you increase the f values for higher, the length of the wave becomes shorter and shorter. So, and also the attenuation of the signal is very, very high at higher frequencies. Okay, so here 3GPP is a main player. Actually, he is the, it's a third generation project partnership. Okay, so 3GPP refers to it, actually looks after the 5G communication. Okay, so the developments in 5G communication taken care by 3GPP. So it is responsible for allocating the frequency bands across the globe. We can see here different countries are having different frequency bands in FR1 and FR2. Okay. So similarly, we also have ITU, okay, International Telecommunication Union, which has three wings, which is ITU-R, ITU-T, and ITU-D. So one will ITU-R takes care of complete wireless communications, and ITU-T refers to telecommunication standardization, and this is development sector. So this is a global regulatory body. Similarly, we also have other regulatory bodies like ISO, ANSI, DIS, NIST, and IEEE. So that's about the introduction part of our course. So as a introduction, we have started with the definition of communication networks and the hardware and software aspects of network designing, and the layered concept of the reference models. And we have discussed three reference models, fundamentally ISO, OSI, TCP/IP, and ATM reference models. And we have also seen the importance of regulatory bodies. So now let us start the actual course. Starts from physical layer, the bottommost layer, which we call it as layer 1. So we'll discuss the functions at layer 1 as a chapter. Then we'll move on to data link layer. So you know that the physical layer is responsible to represent binary ones and zeros. Okay, so and also it is going to handle the physical medium. Okay, so it may be wide or wireless. So if it is a wide, then what sort of cable you are going to use? So whether it is a coaxial cable or shielded twisted pairs or unshielded twisted pairs or optical fiber cables. So what sort of cable you are going to use and what are the characteristics of that cables, all that is a responsibility of this physical layer. So based on the cable, the supported bandwidth and attenuations are varying. Similarly, if it is a wireless scenario, if the medium is wireless, then what sort of frequencies you are going to use, whether it is infrared or microwave frequencies or radio or satellite bands that you are going to use, that will be taken care by physical medium, a physical layer. And similarly, the kind of network, whether you are going to deploy a local area network or metropolitan area network or wide area networks. So accordingly, we decide the cables, right? You can see here unshielded twisted pairs with the different categories. We call it as category 3, 5, 5 extended, and 6, 7, So there are different categories. I'll show the specifications of each category. So how the attenuation of the cable and what's the bandwidth that is supported. And I hope you know that the fiber optical cable is the best one in order to support higher data rates in the case of wide medium at the cost of deployment. Okay, so the deployment cost of the optical network is quite higher. However, per bit if you calculate, it's still cheaper because the cable supports higher bit rates. And this wide area network, the examples, if you look into, it's a SONET, right? Synchronous optical networks and synchronous digital hierarchy SDH and ATM networks, IP networks, and these are certain satellite, satellite networks, right? So lower Earth orbits and geosynchronous or geostationary Earth orbits, and this is a wavelength division multiplexing. Okay, so when you use optical fiber cables, that's when you deploy optical networks for a wide area network, then DWDM, that is a dense wave division, dense wavelength division multiplexing is used. And similarly in the case of LANs, so the coverage area, this we have already discussed. Okay, so the Ethernet IEEE 802.3 is the one which we use to deploy the LANs. And similarly, ATM also can be used for LANs, FDDI, fiber data distribution interfaces, and hub switches. These are the things that we use, connecting devices which we use to form a LAN. And similarly, metropolitan area network, it is something like your city cable network. So where you use a combination of coaxial cables, twisted pairs, as well as optical fiber cables. And these are certain parameters that you need to mind when you discuss about the signal propagation. So the first one is the attenuation of the signal, so which is the fundamental characteristics of the medium. So you take any medium, you have to undergo through some sort of attenuation. Okay, so usually it is defined in terms of decibels per kilometer. And similarly the distortion, so distortion is the Fourier coefficients of the signal is going to be deviated from its original values. And the shape, if you see after traveling certain distance, the signal shape gets changed. It will be deviated from its original shape. So that is exactly called a distortion. And the noise is something like, which is unwanted signal, right? Unwanted signal to anyone. Okay, nobody wants this. So which is a thermal noise, right, in the cable, which is due to the movement of electrons, right? So, and the impulse noises, okay, due to spikes in the power lines. So all this is considered as a noise, which is exactly unwanted thing. And signal to noise ratio, SNR, should be preferably a higher value. That means that your signal strength always should dominate than the noise. So that's how you have to decide your transmitting powers. And the interference is something like a noise only, so which is unwanted signal, but it's a wanted signal for somebody else. Okay, so interference is something like it's unwanted signal for your transmission, but it is actually a wanted signal for somebody else. So it means that when you, for example, if you take your cordless phone and move around in your compound, then if you go closer to your neighbors, then if he is also talking, then there will be some interference, right? The signals gets interfered because your signal gets interfered with his signal. Okay, same way happens to him also. That is a interference. Okay, So there is a try to understand the difference between noise and interference. Noise is unwanted signal. So for all the users, okay. So nobody wants noise, whereas interference is not like that. It is an unwanted signal for you, but the same signal is a wanted signal for others. And you also consider this termination effects when you are using the terminators, the signal, when you are connecting the signal from your mission to the medium, make sure that the terminator or the connecting equipment is a proper, okay. So the end of the day, the impedance should match, okay. So if there is a mismatch in the impedance, then the signal energy gets reflected back. Okay, so there is certain losses. So these are a few aspects that you need to mind about the signal propagation, especially in the wide medium. Same way, it's wireless also, but the attenuation is attenuation of air that we consider. Okay, let's talk about the wide medium first. So when you talk about wide medium, so we broadly classify the wires into three types, which is twisted pair cables, coaxial cables, and optical fiber cables. So let us have a look at one by one. The twisted pair cable is, it looks something like this. You can see a pair of cables which are twisted around. So can someone tell the reason behind this twisting? Hope you have seen this kind of cable somewhere in your life. Did you see, first of all, this kind of cable?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, where you have seen this?
Usually it's present in motors, like the cable that we attach the motor to the actual power line, or
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
and sir, the reason why the twisting is there is to basically cancel out the effects of interference and noise, because if
Exactly. Yeah.
one wire is affected in one way, the other will be opposite polarity. So in the end, it cancels.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. See, if the noise source is on one side of the wire, if the wires are not twisted, then the wire which is close to the noise source gets more affected. So in order to have a equal effect, so you can have a twisting of the wires so that both the wires will be affected equally. Okay, that's the reason behind this twisting. And you can see there is actual conductor, which is a copper wire which is inside, so that actually takes your signal, and the outer one is for protection. It's an insulator, it's for protection. And you see shielded twisted pairs, where you can find multiple layers, you can see, right? So the innermost one is your copper wire, which takes which carries your signal, and the next layer is a insulator. Please mute your
I've done that. I've given you only 4 actually. 4 of
I already have some.
yeah, I understand. I got 4 students' names.
Tell me the names. Yes, now.
Abhishek, Sushant, Neel.
One more will
hello,
be
please
Bhavam.
mute your microphones.
3 groups were there.
That's okay. You told me another name, na?
Yes,
That person must be allotted to someone else. He is in a very bad hurry.
Soumya, please mute your
You give immediately, so I could not really wait. The point is, these 4 I have allotted to you, so there is nothing for you to do about them. And the other 2 who have done under you might have been allotted to someone else. Let them find, or you ask them, or let them inform them, and the 2 of you can just coordinate.
Or you tell me the name whom you have allotted. You will have that in English, right?
Sir, I'm very sorry.
Yeah. You switch off your microphone.
The number you have done.
Yes, done. So let's continue. So there you have innermost a copper cable which carries your signal. Then you have an insulator, right? So then you have a metal shield. So this is quite important. Okay. So this is a metal shield which covers your twisted pair cables. Then apart from that, also you have a plastic cover which gives a more protection. Okay, so the physical protection that you have. So this layer makes a difference between shielded twisted pair cables and unshielded twisted pair cables. Okay, so this actually avoids the external noises, external interference. Okay, so this is another representation. You can see here the actual twisted pair cables are here, and they are covered with the insulating shields, right? So these are the shields, and this is the next level of shield you can see, and this is the outer layer which is a plastic material. So, and I'll also show the unshielded twisted pairs. You can see here. So there is a twisted pair cables same way like earlier, but the shield is missing, right? So you can have a direct outer layer which is a plastic material, but the difference is that this material, okay, so this layer, this metal shield is missing, so that's why we call it as unshielded twisted pairs. Okay, it's a quite cheaper things actually. That shield, is quite costlier. However, so we use that. For avoiding interference. Okay, so can someone think of it how exactly it works and how exactly it helps you to, reduce the interference or avoid the interference?
So it creates something like a Faraday cage. I'm not sure if I'm exactly correct on that, but it's something along those lines. It creates a shielding from external radio interferences and prevents data getting corrupted while being transmitted through electrically.
Exactly correct. That the external radiation or external interferences will not enter. Okay, so this material will take care of that. It absorbs and it won't pass it to the other side. However, there is cost that is involved. So STPs usually takes higher cost. Now let us look at the different categories of the materials. So the unshielded twisted pairs we can classify into different categories based on the attenuations and the bandwidth that they support, and accordingly we use for our applications. So you can see for telephone lines we use category 3. So where there is a minimum bandwidth that is expected and attenuation is quite higher, and category 5E. Okay, and similarly category 6 are Ethernet cables which we use for connecting LAN, right? Different computers in a LAN, we use these cables. Sorry. So category 3, you can see the bandwidth is only 16 megahertz and the attenuation is 11.5 dB and the impedance is 100 ohms, and the usually it's meant for voice applications where we and also 10 base T, which is a standard Ethernet we call it, so which supports 100 Mbps bandwidths. So you can see category 4 and 5 where you have 20 megahertz of bandwidth. The attenuation is a little less, and also it is used for LAN cables. Okay, so 10 base T, 10 refers to 10 megabits per second, and base refers to baseband signal, and T refers to twisted pair cable. And similarly, category 5, you can see the bandwidth supporting is very high at the cost of attenuation. Attenuation is also high. So we get higher bandwidths. I mean, but bandwidth is higher, so you can have a higher data rates that you can support. So which we can also use in fast Ethernets. So which supports a maximum of 100 Mbps data rates. And the 10 base T, it's a standard Ethernet. So when I say that it's a standard Ethernet, it's implied that it is 10 base T. Similarly, 5E category, the bandwidth support is still higher, which is 150 mega, and attenuation is 24 dB. It supports higher data rates. You can see gigabit Ethernets and 155 Mbps. What is this? This is a standard ATM. So I have shown during the ATM reference model the data rates that it supports is 155 Mbps roughly. And the category 6 is 250 megahertz bandwidth. So this you need to remember. Okay, so the bandwidths at least. So the bandwidth and where they use these things you should remember. And category 6 also, apart from gigabit Ethernet, 10 gigabit Ethernet also is supported. So that is about the different categories of unshielded twisted pairs. So based on the category, the bandwidth is supported and we use in different applications. So I hope these are already answered, right? So why we use twisted pair cables, how exactly they reduce the noise. So as we told that the same amount of noise, affects the cables when you twist them. And the use of UTPs in telephone networks. Right. So in telephone networks, you usually have two parallel. There is no twisted pairs as such. But when you make a twisted pair, the noise effects will be equalized on both the lines. And the shielding and lightning. So this is the purpose of using a metal shield in the shielded twisted pair cables, because the external interference will not affect your cable. So like whatever maybe, it may be lightning. So lightning also cannot penetrate right through the metal shield. So the fundamental idea that is the electromagnetic energy cannot pass through the metal sheet. So based on that idea, so we use shielding material for this twisted pair cables. Okay. Yes, this is how it looks. Yeah. So this is a coaxial cable. It is something like your cable network. So you might have seen this kind of cable in olden days for your TVs. So now you have actually satellite based TVs, but in olden days we have a cable. So this cable you can see here. So this is a mesh kind of structure. You can see the conductor, a mesh kind of conducting structure, and two levels of insulating material. And this is a copper wire, which is the innermost conductor, and this is a plastic material for safety. Okay, physical support. So this is about a coaxial cable. So again, different categories based on that. We can also use it for Ethernets, but majority we use for cable TV networks. And coming to optical fiber cable, so the signal traveling through the optical fiber cable is based on the principle of total internal reflections, where you incident the signal into the cable with certain angle of incidence, and based accordingly the signal gets hit the walls of the innermost material, which is a core material, and the signal energy gets reflected back. Again it hits the other wall of the core material, and again it hits back. So that is called internal reflections, total internal reflections. So in order to achieve this reflections, so you have to have another material which is called cladding material, whose refractive index is quite less, right? So there is a small difference between refractive indices of core and cladding materials. So then only you can achieve total internal reflections. Otherwise the signal may get refracted into the cladding material. So how you achieve higher data rates is that, so you can have multiple signals simultaneously. You can see here, so there are two signals which are simultaneously traveling through the cable. Okay, so how they are separated at the other end, because they take different paths, because your angle of incidence is different here. So that's why they take different paths through the cable. So that's how, so you can introduce as many signals as possible with a different angle of incidences. Then accordingly you can handle more signals simultaneously. So the advantage of the optical fiber cables is that they carry data rates. Please mute your microphones, please. So you can classify the optical fibers, into multi-mode fibers and single mode fibers. So the single mode fiber is something like this, where the signal, only one signal can travel, whereas here multiple signals you can have, right? And yeah, and this is how the structure of the cable, optical fiber cable in detail. So you have innermost core material, which is very, very thin, 8 micrometers. So hardly it is, a thinner one as your hair. And then immediate layer is cladding material. So these are actually two essential layers that one cable, that optical cable, that should have. And these buffers and jackets are the other things, extra layers when you are grouping multiple optical cables as a bunch. So it's something like this, you can see here, right? So this outer layers, so that is a jacket. So, and you see here, this is another layer, right? So these are actually your core and cladding materials, so which are multiple such cables can be grouped. So that is this jacket. Okay, so this buffer is to separate the cables. Okay, so this is one optical cable, so we want to separate this cable, so buffer material is used, and all such cables can be grouped as a one using this jacket material. So this is the detailed layer structure of your optical fiber cable. You can see the diameter of each, so it's in terms of micrometers. And the positive side of optical fiber cables is that the noise is very, very less. Okay, so because it's a matter of light, and less signal attenuation, obviously. So usually after a few kilometers you have to have a repeater or regenerator in the case of the other physical medium. Whereas if you use optical cables, for few hundreds of kilometers you need not to have that repeater. Okay, so that's the advantage of this. Okay, for 100 kilometers also it can take, the signal attenuation is very, very less here, and obviously it supports higher bandwidths. The other side of the cables, okay, so the installation cost is very, very high, right? And maintenance, because those are very delicate, right? So that is the disadvantage part of it. So costly, even installation and maintenance is quite higher, and there are different components that we use while deploying it, like splices and all. So when you are installing, you should have you should be very careful. Okay, fine. And this is a kind of multiplexing that you use. So you can see here, so this repeaters, it at a single stretch you can go till hundreds of kilometers. So wavelength division multiplexing we are going to use because the optical fiber communication we talk in terms of wavelengths instead of frequencies. However, wavelength and the frequencies are related, lambda is C by F. So 4 to 32 channels we can club as a part of wavelength division multiplexing. So if you go beyond this number, then we call it as DWDM. Okay, so dense wavelength division multiplexing, where the number of users that you are going to multiplex is much higher. Okay, on the other side, you have to demultiplex it. So that's about wide medium stories, and let's come to wireless medium. So the kind of frequency allocations based on your application, you have to have different frequencies. Okay, so for example, space applications, you have to use these frequencies. So this extremely high frequency, super high frequencies, these are the bands which are mentioned in the electromagnetic spectrum. So for indoor applications, you can see, for example, a Bluetooth and wireless LANs, which covers few meters range, and short range outdoor communication. It's a wireless LAN, which is outdoor communication. So which range of communication is quite higher, and similarly Wi-Fi, WiMAX, right? So GSM, CDM, these are all mobile technologies. So mobile technologies allows you to extend your range of communication to few kilometers, and similarly point-to-point communication, which is at most 100 kilometers, and the satellite communication across countries and continents. So these are different wireless communications that are possible. So here you should mind about your signal attenuations. Okay, so when you go for higher and higher frequencies, the signal attenuations are very high, and you should also mind about the atmospheric variations. So this affects your signal strengths. So for example, when you you watch TV based on your satellite signal, so in a rainy days you don't get much signal strength, right? So I think you have observed this, right? Whenever there are heavy rains, the satellite signal is very poor, where you cannot see the picture. Okay, so and these are the different frequency bands of the electromagnetic spectrum. So and the corresponding applications and the kind of propagation that they have. Okay, so ground wave propagation, sky wave propagation, LOS, line of sight propagation. Okay, and these are the corresponding applications you can see here. For example, AM radio, it is somewhere around this medium frequencies, and if you see FM radios, it comes in very high frequency range, right? So somewhere between 88 mega to 110 mega, if I'm not wrong. So somewhere around it. So your FM radios is, and similarly the satellite communications, so super high frequencies, which ranges from 3 giga to 30 gigahertz. So but in fact, so there are further classified into bands. Okay, so the 3 to 30 gigahertz frequency band, this range is further divided into smaller bands called X band, K band, and so on and so forth. So if you explore satellite communication, you will you can come to know that. Similarly, for radar communications also there are bands. Okay, so then you have microwave communication, where the earth is a curvature, right? The earth surface is a curvature, it's not plane. So obviously you have to have so something called repeaters kind of stuff. So this is called LOS communication. So it's our point-to-point communication. So so you have to move hop by hop. So you cannot have direct communication from here to here, because the the curvature of the earth, so it it hits, so you may not have LOS path. straight away all the time. Okay. So if sender is one side of the earth and the receiver is the other side of the earth, then you cannot have LOS path. So in that case, you have to go for this kind of arrangement, that you have to have hop by hop communication using these repeaters. So this is about terrestrial microwave communication with wireless medium. And this is a satellite communication where minimum of 3 satellites are required to, have a service 24/7. Yes. So that's about the kind of medium. Okay. So wired medium and wireless medium. So based on the application, you have to go for different kinds of wires, right? And different wire supports different bandwidths, data rates accordingly, and they have different attenuations. Optical fiber have very less attenuation at the higher cost, and if you go for wireless communications, then you have to mind about the range of frequencies that you have to use based on your application. So this is one aspect of physical layer, and the next aspect is, so what is the maximum channel data rate that it supports? Okay. So there are two prominent theories that we have. One is called Nyquist theory, and the other one is Shannon's limit. Okay, so these two defines what is the maximum data rate that a channel can support you. Okay, so let us look at the Nyquist rate first. Okay, so you know that when you are transmitting a signal of frequency, the maximum frequency component is FM, then you have to collect minimum of 2 FM samples from that signal so that you can able to reconstruct. That is what the Nyquist theorem says, right? So when you want to transmit a signal, so whose frequency component, maximum frequency component is FM. Okay, for example, let's say 4 kilohertz. 4 kilohertz is the maximum frequency component of your signal. Then at least you have to collect double that of. That means 4 kilohertz double is 8K, right? So 8K samples you have to collect. Okay, as per Nyquist theorem, you have to collect 8K samples from that signal, and that samples maybe you can quantize it and digitize it, all that you convert into digital equivalent digital signal and transmit. However, you have to collect 8K samples so that you can able to properly reconstruct at the other end. So that is what the Nyquist theorem or sampling theorem is, right? Fine. So now for a noiseless channel, the Nyquist theorem says that the maximum data rate or the channel capacity is defined as 2h log v base 2 bits per second, where h is the bandwidth of the signal. Okay, so then v is the number of discrete signal levels. Okay, the number of discrete signal levels that you use, and yeah, so that is 2h log v base 2. For example, for a binary signal, okay, so you are using just 2 levels for a binary signal. If you use 2 voltage levels, then for example digital signal, okay, so you take a binary signal which is a digital one, and you have only 2 levels. Log 2 base 2 is 1, and 2 into the bandwidth. Okay, so twice the bandwidth, signal bandwidth is your maximum data rate. Okay, so remember that the Nyquist theorem is applicable only for noiseless channel. So in practical cases, most of the time we have a noise in the channel. Okay, so there is nothing like noiseless channel in practical cases. All the channels are suffering with noise. So obviously, the Nyquist theorem may not be directly applicable. So that's why we come up with another theorem, another aspect that is called Shannon's limit. So which is applicable for noisy channel. So as per Shannon's limit, what it says is the channel capacity at the maximum data rate is defined as h into log of 1 plus SNR with base 2. Okay. So h is again your bandwidth, log of 1 plus SNR, that is signal to noise ratio with base 2. It's a bits per second. Okay, the units are bits per second. So this is for noisy channel. Nyquist theorem is defined for noiseless channel. So where the bandwidth is involved in both the channel capacity formula, but V, which is number of discrete signal levels, is involved in the case of Nyquist theorem. So whereas SNR is involved in the case of Shannon's limit. Okay. For example, the channel, extremely noisy channel, then this component is very, very high, right? Sorry, this is very, very low actually. Okay, so when this is very, very low, then the channel capacity tends to 0, right? So because log 1, this then the between the Nyquist bitrate and the Shannon's limit. Okay, so this is very important. We'll look into this aspect within numerical. Okay, so if I ask you by giving the parameters, like I'll give the number of discrete signal levels to you, and the bandwidth I'll give it, and as well as the SNR I'll give. Now if I ask you what is the channel capacity, then how to decide it? Whether I should go with Nyquist theorem, or I should go with the Shannon's limit, because the data is given for both. Okay, so I'll say that it's a binary signal. Binary signal means it has 2 levels. Okay, so 2 voltage levels. So V is 2, and also I'll give the SNR value. So for example, if I say SNR is 30 dB, okay, so it means that this value is 1000, right? So h will be given to you. So in that case, which formula you use and which formula is actually applicable? Okay, so the simplest thing is whichever is the minimum value when you calculate C value here. So whichever gives a minimum, that is the final channel capacity. So in that way you can take it. Okay, so if the parameter values are given for both the formula, like I'll give the V value as well as SNR value and H value, then you have to calculate both the values. So channel capacity you have to calculate as per Nyquist theorem and as well as per Shannon's limit. However, you select minimum of those 2 values. That is your final channel capacity. Okay, let you start with solving this numerical. That so a channel has 4 kHz bandwidth, SNR of 30 dB. Determine maximum information rate for 128 level encoding. So you can see here the data is given for related to both the signals, both the formula, right? So V is given, so which is a 127 level encoding. So the number of levels is 128. Okay, so 128 level encoding. So the number of levels V is 128, and B or H. So in this formula it's H bandwidth. So this is given as 4K, and this is 128, and also SNR is given, okay, which is 30 dB. So direct substitution you should not do. You have to take equivalent decimal value. Okay, 30 dB equivalent decimal is how much? So 30 is equal to 10 log of SNR, 10 log SNR with base 2. So SNR value in decimal is 10 power 3, which is 1000. So 30 dB equivalent decimal value is 1000. So you substitute these values here. So 2 into 4K, which is 8K. 8K log of V is 128 base 2. So this is 7. So 8K into 7 is 56 kbps. So that is channel capacity as per Nyquist theorem. Now come to this. This is 4K and log of 1 plus SNR value is decimal value is 1000. So log of 1001 with base 2. Can someone tell the value?
9.96.
9.96 into 4K, right? Because H is 4K. So H is 4K.
39.
So log of 1001 is equal to divided by base 2. So 9.96 into 4, which is 39.86K. So close to 40K. So 40K and this is 56K. So which is the minimum value? So that is Shannon's limit is the minimum value. So that is the one you have to consider. Okay. So that's how you have to define the channel capacity. Okay, same way, can you tell this? Yes, come again.
So for the log part of the Shannon limit, log 1 plus Sn base 2. So it is log 31 to base 2, right? We take it in decibels itself.
No, I told you you had to substitute in decimal. So 30 dB equivalent is 1000. So log of 1 plus 1000 with base 2.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So that is 9.96 actually, right? So log of 1 plus 1000 with base 2 is 9.967. Okay, so same way can you calculate and tell this? Channel bandwidth is 4K again, SNR is 30 dB. So here the number of levels is reduced to 4 instead of 128. That is only the difference. So I don't think Shannon's limit will change. It will be retained, right? So because Shannon's limit is defined in terms of bandwidth and SNR, so those values are not changing in the second numerical. So Shannon's limit is retained as 39.8 kbps, but the Nyquist rate will come down. So it is 8K into log of 4 base 2. So that is 16 kbps, if I am not wrong. So Nyquist rate is 16 kbps and Shannon's limit is 39.8 kbps. So now which is the final one? The final value is 16 kbps. So that's how you have to define the channel capacity. So if you are given with only SNR and bandwidth, straight away you can go ahead with Shannon's limit, no confusion. So if you are given with bandwidth and the number of levels, straight away you can go ahead with Nyquist rate. But the data is given which can be used to calculate both the limits, then you calculate both and take minimum. Okay, so now coming to this, if a binary signal is sent over 3K channel whose SNR is 20 dB, what is the maximum achievable data rate? So binary signal in the sense, it has two levels. It's implied, okay? So binary signal has two levels, so log 2 base 2, it's 1. So 2K, 2H is 3K, so 6 kbps is the channel rate as per Nyquist rate, and Shannon's limit is 3k into log of 1 plus 100, right? So log of 1 plus 100, which is 101, divided. So with base 2 is 6.658 into 3k. So 19.97k. Okay, so 19.97 kbps as per Shannon's limit, and as per Nyquist rate it is 6 kbps. So what's our final value? What's the maximum achievable data rate? Are you able to follow? So let me ask some student to have the answer for this question. Yes. Tarun, can you give the answer? Tarun.
No, sir, I wasn't calculating that way.
Okay.
Sorry, sir.
Yuvraj Jain.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you give the final answer for this question?
So here we have two levels. So the Nyquist is 2 into 3 kilo into log base 2 of 2. So as shown in 6 kbps.
Yeah.
And for the Shannon capacity, 1 plus SNR is 20 dB, that's 100. Yes, that's 100. So that
Okay.
is 19.9 kbps, sir. So it should be 6. That's the final answer.
Yes, exactly. So you calculate here, the data is given. Okay, the binary signal means it has two levels. So Nyquist rate is 2 into h is 3k, so 6k into log 2 base 2. Number of levels is 2 because of a binary signal. So it's a 6 kbps as per Nyquist limit, and Shannon's limit is h into log of 1 plus SNR with base 2. H is 3k, and log of 1 plus SNR 20 dB equivalent is 100, log of 101 with base 2, so which is altogether it is 19.975 kbps. So now you have to pick up the smaller smaller one among these two. So 6 kbps is your final value. So that's how you have to address this kind of numericals. And this is very straightforward. There is no confusions so which one to pick up, because the channel bandwidth is given and SNR is given. So there is no data about the number of signal levels. So straight away you can use Shannon's limit. So it's a straightforward. So Shannon's limit says that the channel capacity is B into log of 1 plus SNR with base 2. So it's a simple substitution. 4k into log of 1 plus 20 dB is equivalent 100, 30 dB equivalent 1000, 40 dB equivalent 10,000. So direct substitutions. So here, what's your observation for this numerical? The values given is that, so when you have higher and higher SNR, okay, so when you have higher SNR, keeping the bandwidth constant, you can achieve higher channel capacities, right? So you can see here, right? So you can see here that for a given bandwidth, so when you go for higher SNR values, so when you get higher SNR values, it means that, so maybe you have to maintain higher transmitting powers, or so you have to undergo through minimum noise values. So in either of the cases or both, you will have higher SNR value, so that the channel can handle higher data rates. So that's the maximum channel capacity can be higher. So that's the conclusion of this. Okay, so if you increase bandwidth, then still you will have more channel capacity. That is always there. Okay. But I don't want to increase this because it's a matter of resources. So I want to have this fixed, and I try to achieve higher SNR. How I can achieve higher SNR? So try to minimize the noise. You try to minimize the noise, or maintain higher transmitting powers, so that signal component will be dominating the noise component. So now coming to this one, television channels are 6 megahertz wide. How many bits per second can be sent if 4 level digital signals are used? Assume that the noiseless channel. So it's again straightforward. You have to use straight away Nyquist rate. So there is no chance of thinking Shannon's limit, because SNR is not given, and moreover it's mentioned straight away that the channel is noiseless. So it is 2h log of V base 2. So V is 4, so log 4 base 2 is 2. 2 into 2h. 2h is 12 mega, so 24 megabits per second. It's simple substitution in a Nyquist rate. And these are certain numericals which can be taken as homework, and you can try to achieve these values, or if these values are correct or not, let you tell in the next session. And let us quickly discuss this numerical. What is the bit rate that requires to digitize the human voice, assuming 8 bits per sample? Okay, so how to address this numerical? Can someone give idea about this?
So you can take the as frequency as 22 kilohertz, and
Why,
then multiply.
may I know the reason why you are taking 22 kilohertz?
So the maximum range of human hearing is 20 to 20 kilohertz. So usually when we take, or suppose we take audio files of music, we know that their sampling rate is around 44.1 kilohertz. So it's more of a standard that people take it as 22 kilohertz. So that's why I'm taking 22.
Okay, so any other answer?
Like 3 kilohertz.
Sorry?
So human voice frequency is 3 kilohertz.
Okay, okay. So any other answer?
So the maximum spectrum of what the human, like basically our vocal cords can produce, like attenuates down at 5 kilohertz ish.
Okay,
So
okay.
0 to 5 kilohertz, we will have a baseband signal, and then bitrate will be somewhere around 10 kbps. So, or 10,000 samples basically.
10,000 samples. Okay, okay. Okay. So somebody told that, see, one thing I want to clarify here, we want to digitize the human voice. So it is not that a human can listen. Okay, so it's not that audio range we are talking about. Okay, so audio range is exactly, it's a 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz is the audio range that one can listen. But here the human voice, so we should think of that human what voice frequencies he can produce. Okay, usually. So I'm not talking about any abnormal kind of sounds that one can make, but usually the human voice, we can majority is the maximum component is usually 3.5K, but we consider it's 4K. So okay, at my maximum frequency component of human voice, we consider generally it's a 4 kilohertz. So that is actually the sufficient inputs that I can give to give the answer for this. So 4 kilohertz is your FM of human voice frequencies. So as per Nyquist rate, you have to collect double that of, right? So that means 8K samples you have to collect. So when you collect 8K samples per second and each sample is represented with 8 bit, so 8K into 8 bit, so that is 64 KB kilobits per second. So that is your bit rate. Okay. So here you should understand the difference between audio range and the human voice frequencies. Same way here you can calculate this. So it's noiseless channel. This 10th numerical I'm talking about, noiseless channel, which is, so straight away you can think of Nyquist rate. So that formula you can use to solve this, and this the SNR is asked. Okay, so 50 kilo line. So that means the bandwidth is given to you, and SNR is to be calculated, and T1 carrier is given. It's something interesting that, so what exactly this T1 carrier is. Okay, so this is you will come to know when we talk about multiplexing, so which is again a part of physical layer aspect. However, for the time being, you take that as 1.544 Mbps. Okay, so that's a standard. Okay, so how we'll achieve, we'll see when we discuss about multiplexing in detail. So T1 carrier, that's a standard value, is 1.544 Mbps. Okay, so that is your channel capacity, and 50 kilohertz is the line bandwidth. So SNR is asked. So I hope you can do this. So you will arrive at 93 dB. Okay. So here the key point is that you should know that a T1 carrier the maximum capacity is 1.544 Mbps. So this point you need to remember to solve this numerical. Okay, so this one, this is quite interesting. Here you can see here that a noiseless channel is 4 kilohertz. Channel, a noiseless channel is 4 kilohertz. That's a bandwidth given to you and sampled at every 1 millisecond. Okay, so sampled at every 1 millisecond. Each sample is represented with 16-bit and 1024 bits. So what is the maximum data rate? So now let you understand this. So when you have a signal, of 4 kilohertz, okay, so and it is sampled at 1 millisecond. Okay, so as per Nyquist rate, this 4 kilohertz signal should be sampled. You have to collect the samples at 8,000 samples. I mean a double that of. Okay, so it's a double that of. So 8K samples per second you need to collect, and this sample value, which is 16-bit, you can keep here to get 128 kbps and keep this 1024 here. So 8,000 into 1024, it leads to 8.2 Mbps. Okay. So that this is enough actually. So 4 kilohertz signal should be sampled at minimum of 8,000 samples per second. So here sampling every 1 millisecond, this we are ignoring it. Okay, so this we are ignoring it. We are not considering it when you have a signal of 4K. So as for Nyquist rate, you know that you have to collect double that of. So 8K samples, you are collecting it. So that is about that. And same way you can answer this also. A digital signal. Yes.
Sir, in the previous question, if it is given in the question itself that the sampling is like 1K, then how can we assume that we should sample at 8 kilo?
That is a standard Nyquist theorem, you know, right?
Yeah,
so the sampling theorem, you have to follow the sampling theorem. That is the idea behind this numerical. You have to follow the sampling theorem. So here 4K, channel for a 4 kilohertz channel. So it's important to collect double that of, that is 8K samples. So now coming to this, where 160 kbps is permitted with a bandwidth of 20K. So find the number of levels and find SNR. So in order to find the number of levels, we have to use Nyquist rate. So 160 kbps equal to 2 into 20K log V base 2. So what's the value? Can someone answer this? 160 kbps is equal to 2 into 20, so 40K. So this gives 4. So what is the number of levels? It is 16 if I am not wrong.
2 parts 4, 16, yes.
Yes. So same way SNR, can someone tell? 160 kbps is equal to 20K into log of 1 plus SNR with base 2. So 20K on right side and 160 kbps left side. So it's a 8. So 8 equal to log of 1 plus SNR with base 2. So 1 plus SNR is equal to 2 power 8, which is 256. And SNR is 255, if I'm not wrong. So can someone tell in terms of dB? It's roughly 24.07 dB. Okay. So this is how you can solve this using these two channel limits. Yes, we'll wind up here. So we have seen in this session that the ATM reference model followed by physical layer aspects, where the kind of medium that you use in the networks, so based on the applications, which is the aspect of physical layer, and the channel capacity. So there are two main aspects that are involved in defining the channel capacity, which is Nyquist bitrate and Shannon's limit. So Nyquist rate is usually applied for noiseless channels, and Shannon's limit is used for noisy channels. However, if the data is given related to both the limits, then calculate both of them and pick up the smaller value. So that's how you can define the channel capacity. So in the next session, maybe we'll talk about line coding techniques and the other aspects of physical layer. Okay, so till this, any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll try to wind up here. So, for every class we are sending the PPT, better we suggest to go through it. So as and when you get the PPT, so that you feel comfortable in listening to the next session. Okay. So, and related to CN project, so if you have any ideas, any doubts, I'll clarify it. However, just before that, let me tell you that how exactly CNP project we handle it. So it's a 1 credit project. It's as say equal as the regular CN lab that you do. Okay, so online, physically that you come and conduct the experiments. Please, someone can mute this. Please mute your microphones. Hello, please mute your microphone, please. Valaja Shekhar Nikhil, can you please mute your microphone? Yes. So actually CN lab altogether, it's a 2 credit lab. So where the regular experiment conduction is weighted for 1 credit and the project is weighted for another credit. So the CN lab is concerned, so we have QualNet, which is a network simulator, so which is a GUI based. Okay, so it's a user friendly tool where we can evaluate the performance of different networks, both wired and wireless, and including sensor networks, all that stuff. And we have framed 4 experiments based on that tool, and we have 3 experiments based on the hardware equipment that we have in the lab. So we have a LAN trainer kit where you can connect the different topologies, and you can explore the performance of different protocols like random access protocols, Aloha, Pure Aloha, Slotted Aloha, CSMA, CSMS, CD, and stop and wait protocols. So these are all different flow control and medium access protocols. Okay, so that also that can be verified. The performance of those protocols can be verified using the hardware kit. However, the software implementations also is possible, and you can do it. And that is 3 experiments we framed on the hardware kit, and the remaining 3 experiments we have framed based on CRCPP implementations. Okay, so like few of the other control techniques like checksum and CRC, cyclic redundancy check, parity check, all these are part of data link layer. So those things we have framed based on CRCPP, where a student is comfortable with, and also the routing protocols, the shortest path algorithms, which are part of network layer, are also framed based on CRCPP. So altogether, it's a 3 experiments based on CRCPP, and 3 experiments based on the hardware trainer kit, and 4 experiments we have framed on QualNet tool. Okay, so software tool. So this is about total 10 experiments of CN lab. Okay, so this goes parallelly. Okay, so that means out of 20 students in a batch, so probably 7 students will conduct the experiments based on QualNet tool, and 6 students may conduct experiments based on CRCPP, and the rest 6 students may execute experiments based on hardware equipment. Okay, so and after 3 weeks, so once you complete the 3 experiments, then you will be shifted to another batch. I mean, in the sense another part. Okay, so we have divided into part A, part B, part C. So the part A consists of 4 experiments of QualNet based experiments, and when you complete 3, then you will be moved on to part B experiments. When you complete the 3, and you will be moved on to part C. So like this, after 3 cycles, you will complete 9 experiments, and the last experiment of QualNet, that is part A, will be conducted commonly at the end. So this is how we run the CN lab. Okay, so for every 3 weeks you will be moved on to the next part. Any doubts till this point? Okay, so being a student, what you supposed to do? So while conducting and after conducting, you have to maintain an observation book, so where you need to note down the readings. Okay, so under topologies, and as per the faculty instructions, so you have to tabulate the values, and you have to write the journal. Okay, in the next lab. Okay, so today you have conducted experiment, and you have noted all the readings and observations, and the same thing with some the procedures that you have followed, including all together, you have to narrate your experiment report in the journal and submit while coming to the next lab. So this is how the lab is conducted, and there will be day-to-day evaluation. So like 4 plus 3 plus 3. Okay, so 4 is for conduction, 3 is for solving the exercise questions that are a part of manual, as well as some exercises will be given by the faculty during the conduction. So altogether it's a 3 marks. How you perform along based on that you will score that, and the remaining 3 is for Viva. Okay, so 4 plus 3 plus 3. This is how the total 10 marks is divided in the day-to-day evaluation. Okay, so if you have any doubts related to CN lab, you ask me. Otherwise, I will pass on to CN project. So you have to maintain observation as well as journal, the hard copy. Okay. So now coming to CN project. So CN project is also for 1 credit. The guidelines are already given to you and also uploaded in the MS Teams that we are handling now. And yeah, the student is free to select the topic of his interest. It should be in the communication networks domain. Okay, so the communication related. So you cannot bring something like image processing techniques and try to submit here. So that is not allowed. However, so here we give we encourage the student to implement their ideas actually. So there are students who actually have something in their mind, they want to implement that, but no time or there is no weightage. So either of the cases, because of that he keep that idea in his mind itself. Okay, so this is the opportunity where you can bring that out and try to implement it, no matter whether it gives a fruitful result or so you may not able to get the expected results. That's a different story. However, you have to do something. Okay, so that this is the opportunity for you where there is a weightage for your idea. Okay, so make sure that that is related to communication domain. Okay, so that's first thing I want to highlight, because so don't think that for the sake of doing you have to do, or I have also given some samples, right? Some sample titles I have given. So most of them are related to 4G and 5G networks. Okay, so that technologies I have given, and you need not to select from that, but I have given as a reference based on the requests from student side. You maintain that level. Okay, the complexity level or the quality and quantity of work that you need to do. Okay, so for that reason I have given that titles which can be taken as a reference, and you are free to do alone, as well as you can take your mates of who belongs to the same batch. Okay, so you cannot take your friend who belongs to other batch, because there is a problem in evaluating also. So that is another thing. And yeah, so how this process happens is, so as you whatever you are selecting the project and you have idea to do it, so you describe that in IEEE format. So you present the synopsis with the details. Okay, the title and your details in the sense your name, your registration number, section, roll number, all that stuff you include it, and make an abstract, then followed by methodology, whatever. Okay, so how you are going to execute, what tools, and what is your inputs, and what is expected results, all that stuff, and the references. Okay, so what is the journal article that you are taking as a base paper. Okay, so that which inspires you to do this project. Okay, so that reference details also you have to keep. So the template, the IEEE format, you can follow it. Okay, so you can get it from IEEE.org, that A4 IEEE format. So you can download it and you can substitute your content in that, as simple as that. So it should be a minimum of 2 pages and a maximum of 4 pages. So it should be a soft copy. So what you should do, so after making all this, so with all these details, whatever I have told you, so you send it to me. So I will, scrutinize that. I will look into it. So what thing first I'll do is I'll look into the duplications, whether this project is, submitted by somebody else. First, I'll look into that. So if not, then I'll go through your abstract and the details. So if I feel that yes, it's a worth of doing, and the student can able to show the results, the feasibility. Okay. So sometimes what happens, you feel very interesting when you read a particular article and you try to implement the same. So, but unfortunately, at the end, you may not able to get the results because of some glitches. So maybe that tool is not, open source. Later, you will realize that after getting approval for the project. So to avoid all this, what we do is we'll just suggest the student that whatever the requirements. So if it is a hardware project, then what are the hardware equipment that you need? So whether you have it or not, if it is a software implementation, then whether that particular tool, how you are going to execute it, which tool you are going to use, which language, whether you know that language, all that things we'll, discuss, and accordingly, we'll accept it. Okay. So once the coordinator accepts, then it will be forwarded to your corresponding batch faculty and they will approve it. So their decision is final. Okay. So if the coordinator says yes and the faculty says no, no is final. Okay. So when both accepts, then obviously the batch faculty, the faculty who are handling you, they are the one who are going to give the final acceptance. So they may give mail. Okay. So whatever the mail that you are giving synopsis to the coordinator, the same mail will be handled. Okay. So the same mail will be forwarded with coordinator decisions, and the faculty also will reply back to the student as well as the coordinator. If they are rejecting, they should give the comments that what are the reasons to get rejected. So okay, so these things are already given to the faculty. The instructions are given to the faculty, and so once you get approval from your corresponding batch faculty, then you can proceed with, and the tentative dates are given to you. So the evaluation is like this. For the project, we have synopsis presentation, midterm presentation, and end presentation. So final presentation. So synopsis presentation carries 30 marks and midterm carries 30 marks. Altogether, it's 60 marks internals. Then the 40 marks is for final presentation, where you need to show all the results, whatever you have proposed in your synopsis submission. So the same results are expected. So based on satisfactory results, the faculty will assess you. So that is a 40 marks. So 60 plus 40, 100. And the same way, regular labs, day-to-day evaluation, 60 marks for 10 experiments, 60 marks, and the end exam 40 marks. So that 100 and this 100 gets averaged. So that is how it works. So if you have any doubts, you can ask. And another thing I want to highlight is you can also go at most 3 students in a team, but proportionally we expect the quality and quantity of work. So majorly we see that your work is a worth of doing for at least 2 months. Okay. So accordingly we will assess. So any doubts?
Sir, I have something to say, sir.
Yes.
Sir, like we don't know the subject in depth so much at this point of time.
Yes.
And
yes.
even the titles you have provided in the teams, sir,
Yeah.
sir, like all of them are alien to me at least. So, sir, I don't know, sir, like how to choose a project and at least where to look for the project.
Yeah. So very good question. So whatever the samples that I have given are mostly they are MATLAB based. Okay. So you can explore the MATLAB. See everything. Initially we are new. Okay. So including me, when I start reading about 5G networks, the architecture and all, I'll come to know something. So nobody comes to me and explain this is 5G network and all. Nobody feel happy that nobody told 5G network, so I don't know. It's not like that. So we have to explore it. So there are students who have already have something in their mind. Okay, so they will go ahead with no further guidance. But for the students who raised just now the question that you can go through the articles. Okay, so you can go through the Scopus indexed journal articles actually. So don't waste your time in reading the articles which are not exactly the Scopus indexed, and some conference papers, so which are not worth of reading. Okay, so the things, it's at your level, it's still challenging for you to decide which is worth of reading, which article is not worth of reading. It comes with experience actually. But however, at this point of time, I can suggest you that for simple understanding and going, so you explore the MATLAB tool itself, so which we have license actually. So that's the best thing that I can suggest you. So there are different toolboxes that are available. For example, LTE. So LTE, there is a toolbox, and similarly for 5G there is a toolbox, and the MATLAB is getting for every 6 months it gets updated. The toolboxes are updated, so you can explore the latest technologies that you have. Okay, so this is one end. So where exactly you can get the entire code. So, and it's a matter of pressing F5. Okay, so when you press F5 in MATLAB, code, you will get the results. So here your contribution is that you should explore the background of it, and you try to understand it, and what exactly that programming is, what that code gives. Okay, so that is your contribution, and you should be able to understand it and explain and present it to the panel members such that they will be convinced. Okay, so obviously you will learn something there. So for example, currently I am doing in 5G and 6G networks. So what I can suggest is that for easy understanding of what exactly this 5G is, everybody talks. So simple understanding is you go ahead with YouTube. So if you are as you told that, so nothing then simplest way is you just go through what do you call YouTube videos. Okay, so for example, I'll tell you the fundamental aspects of 5G is that massive MIMOs. Okay, so you just explore what exactly massive MIMOs is. And similarly, hybrid beamforming, you explore what exactly hybrid beamforming is. So what is beamforming, what is different beamformings. When you start exploring, it gives related videos so that right. So when you start exploring beamforming, it gives you analog, what is analog beamforming, what is digital beamforming, then what is hybrid beamforming. So all this stuff you can get there. So there are a few professors. Okay, so you try to follow that process when you explore these YouTube videos. Okay, so there are many local people, local in the sense like students like you, they understand something and they try to upload in the YouTube. That happens actually, but there are chances that they understand in a different way, and when they present it, they will try to take in other way. Okay, so in order to avoid all that stuff, try to explore the authors. Usually Rappaport. So Rappaport is a main player in this wireless technologies. So he is a very active researcher. Like that, there are very few. So usually I follow them, and yeah. So that's the simplest way. So with respect to, I'm talking about the 5G networks. So similarly, if you have any interested area, you can also explore those things. So if you feel that you do not know ABCD of that domain, the simplest way is you go through YouTube videos of some reliable sources. Okay, reliable presenters. So you just check their background also, like who is that, make sure that he is an active researcher. Okay, so yeah, so that's the one side of it, and the other side you explore MATLAB tool and try to get it. So this is another thing. So if you have any idea, and another thing that Cisco Packet Tracer is not allowed to take the projects, because it's a simplest thing where we don't feel that it's a worth of doing for a couple of months. Okay, so that's about that from my end. So still, if you have queries, you can ask. Yes, okay, hopefully not. Yeah, we'll wind up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.